Welcome to Shatter Shorts. This is where every weekday at noon Eastern, I bring to you a short conversation with an expert, a thought leader, a doer in the realm of innovation for the built environment. Today is no different. I am joined today by Aaron Anderson. He is the Director of Innovation at Swinerton. And as Aaron and I were planning this conversation today, he came up with what I thought was a fantastic idea for a topic. And it really, in a way, it follows in the heels of a conversation I had several weeks ago. I know we ran it as an encore in the last couple of days, but Tom Scarangello from Thornton Tomasetti talked about making innovation accessible. And I think this is a nice juxtaposition today, this idea, Aaron, of talking about innovation bottlenecks. And I think we'll probably talk specifically about inside the organization, but it could certainly be outside. It could certainly be broader. But first, thanks for joining me. And let's talk about innovation bottlenecks.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Glad to be here.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love the idea because, or maybe I don't, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but I think it's real, right? It's a reality that we face in our organizations and beyond, certainly. But I think when we're looking at the AEC space, the CRE space, and innovation, there are a lot of organizations that I think want to be innovative, whatever that means in their corporate language, but they don't have a corporate culture of innovation. Maybe I know from my background in architecture, we're so deadline driven. It's hard to think about being innovative when we're trying to meet that next deadline. So, what are you seeing in your world and in your work that leads you to think a lot about this idea of innovation bottleneck?
Well, I think the organizational structure is clearly a huge part of it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, when someone's on project deadlines and they already have a budget and they're already, have a plan, innovation is a waste of their time and it's not efficient, right? Really, right?
Yeah.
So that's a huge part is like having some dedicated folks that are getting ahead of it, understanding how to do things in a new way, so that when you bring that to a project, you're actually you've overcome that, you've overcome the skills gap, you've
Hmm.
overcome those functional gaps for actually putting the work in place, and that's a huge necessity. Otherwise, the first 3 times you try something new on a project, it's going to prove that it was less efficient.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Sort of
you know
confirmation bias in a way. Yeah.
yeah, and that's sort of where it starts, but then it's also about strategy, right? I think um innovation doesn't work if it's not part of a strategy, if your intention
Right.
is to stay with the same old business model, because there are plenty of software tools, and I think that's why folks focus so much on software tools
Mhm.
as vehicles of innovation, because you can kind of plug them into a process, and it makes sense that you're going to achieve some more efficiency from having a better digital process. But if that's done in a piecemeal way, that's done without a high level strategy in mind, then it really isn't going to achieve efficiency. You're going to end up with just a bunch of silos between products, and probably between your own internal teams, thinking that the communication is being done in the software, thinking that the problem has been solved, and really you just have fewer people that are aware of what needs to be communicated.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I think, um, I think there's also this, it brings to mind, and your title does as well, Director of Innovation. We're launching a mastermind group at Shadow Partners. We're launching a mastermind group for directors of innovation because we realize that people like you, I don't actually know this for sure. I didn't ask you this, but you're probably the first to hold that role or to hold that title. Um, and we're seeing this across the industry. It's like, what is a director of innovation? What does innovation mean inside of a construction company or inside of an architecture or an engineering firm or something like that? And so, um, as further developing our community, bringing people together to help figure out what does this role actually mean and how do we do this, because it is certainly different, or a different role and a different point of view. So how are you fostering this inside of Swinerton as you're looking at all the things like you said, there's deadlines, there's all kinds of tools to juggle and maybe bring some new ones in, et cetera. What's your focus on the day to day and how do you foster this type of culture?
Well, we've tried to look at, so first of all, we've actually had an innovation director position for about 5 years. And I came into this role a couple of years ago after um, pushing for some specific innovations and trying to productize some of our offerings in some specific markets.
Hmm.
But um, y- I think it takes a broader vision about what we could do. So, when we looked outside, I've looked outside at a lot of other industries, because clearly there's not a ton of leaders that are getting it done in our business, right?
Hmm.
There's a lot to do. Most of it's like specific project achievements that have occurred. Like, we managed to raise this roof and hold it up in the air for 9 months while we completely rebuilt the structure under it, and then it's totally not applicable to the next project. Um, but finding those things that are, there's tool companies and manufacturing companies. Our industry is notorious for how little we spend on R&D,
Hmm.
but at the same time, so much of what we do, for intellectual property, to build patents, to build copyrighted material, whatever it takes, even to maintain industry secrets, you have to have some kind of repetition. You have to be able to turn those things into products.
Right.
And so there's always this appetite. Yeah, we should patent that. We should invent this thing. That's really difficult for a construction company to do. And so trying to figure out if there's a way, for a lot of folks, there is a lot of the corporate venture capital in construction is focused on um, essentially incubating companies that they might be able to use. And then also potentially offsetting the cost of bringing those new tools through, that company becoming successful. When we look to some other industries, though, they use their corporate venture capital to actually um, secure intellectual property.
Mm.
So there's a lot of industries that are out there investing really to be close to these inventions so that they can
Right.
bring them in and productize them for themselves, and so that really changes a lot of, it forces us to forge our own new path into this, which really is about bringing along a existing organization, not creating new business models in parallel to that existing organization. Like, how do we transform this existing organization? And that's really, so for me, what I'm learning is that that's really about educating. It's about showing people how we, and also brainstorming with people, like, how do we
Mm.
creating those relationships in the company, which is, sharing that vision and still telling those stories about how we could do business, and then figuring out together how we go from here to there.
Yeah. So, what is the biggest point of friction for you then, in everything that you just described? I mean, this has to be, I would think, uh, pushing a rock uphill. I don't know how steep the slope is, but what's the biggest point of friction?
um, I think I think we have a lot of teams that have they we've developed workflows and we've developed
Mm.
expectations about things based on a lot of intuition and experience.
Okay.
And each project manager on a large project, or even on any project, is really the decision maker, the business leader for that project. And so it's not just convincing, an executive VP to push an idea.
Mm.
It's actually convincing all of those individual teams, according to their experience on a project, that trying something new will work.
Okay.
Um, And so it's sort of, in some ways, it's almost like being that product leader
Mm,
for a new technology entering a mass consumer market. You have that internally. We have that early adopter Bass curve cycle, right? And so we've got to go and make something work with someone who is interested and motivated personally, maybe even, or maybe motivated by a client or motivated by a new client that we want to
mm.
impress. There has to be
External,
some
yeah.
kind of external motivation there, or an intrinsic motivation with an individual who just wants to see change or believes in change, and then work in that section there, and then show the opportunities and market the opportunities internally, and confirm the opportunities internally. Right. So there's all of those. So, people, a lot of our project managers and our leaders are convinced and motivated by a lot of different things. Some of them are thinking like, predictability is the most important thing to me. Some are thinking like it's all about that budget bottom line from day one. I can't count on future savings when I'm seeing like early, increased costs. So it really is talking through and explaining and showing experience from other businesses or
Mhm.
experience from other parts of our company that, hey, we can do this. Yeah, it's going to feel weird at first, but eventually it's going to work out. And so that trust is really like the friction. It's
Yeah.
that and I've heard a lot of, we talk, there's a lot of psychology and marketing around that, which, um, a lot of the consensus is that most of that stuff occurs by being prepared and having the right tools in place, and then waiting for the pull in the market,
Mm.
right? Waiting for that internal pull, waiting for people to ask for it, and reducing the friction that way. But at the same time, if we completely wait on that, there is no leadership, right? So we have to, we do need to listen to the field. We do need to listen to the people in the front line, but we also need to carry the vision and tell the story and share the idea about it, so that there is leadership in the situation.
Yeah, that's really interesting, right? It's how do you balance that? How do you balance the weight, the patience, the whatever with the leadership? And um how much of your role, I mean, is your role, um is that the leader role? Can you just purely forge ahead and push innovation, or are you having to? Is there one person that can do that, or is everybody balancing those dynamics?
Yeah, everybody's balancing it. I mean, it really has to do again with the business structure, right?
Sure. Yeah.
We don't have the kind of margins that allow us to go out and just independently develop technology.
Okay.
Um, we're 100% dependent on what the market, what the startup market, what the mature software market, mature tool market is willing to
Hmm.
develop, right? So that's one of the constraints. And then internally, um, the way that we've managed cost in construction is to put as much overhead administration cost into projects. And so unless you already, clients don't want to pay for experimentation. And so,
Yeah.
right, they're paying for results. I mean,
Exactly.
there's not a bid line in a hard bid job that says like experimentation, right? And then
Yeah.
those other categories that do exist there, like, um are heavily watched. So, when you
Hmm.
put an allowance in or something like that,
Right. Sure. Yeah.
the allowances and contingencies are typically things that have some serious eyeballs on them.
Right.
So
Right.
uh, uh,
Yeah.
that's so the way that we do it is we try to take little bites, right? We try to
Hmm.
learn and build the capabilities around it. So if we're talking about digital design, we'll start a project sometimes. It's a long, slow process of, like, if we look at the IPD development in the markets, uh, a lot of clients get shy as soon as we get to some pricing, and then all of a sudden everything gets converted to GMPs, and it starts to look like a different kind of contract than what you had initially started. It looks a lot more like a traditional design build scenario, right?
Right.
So there's all of these situations where we have opportunities to shift that contract type that then frees us up to innovate and do things in a better way. But most of the time, it's like counteracting that fear, of the unknown, in order to actually get teams to try this thing out. So that's 95% of what we do, is getting a new tool into a project, and then nurturing that with capability and intelligence about how that should work and what the implications are. So, like, if we're talking about robotics, right, it's like going into
Mm.
the situation and taking that team and saying to the VDC team, hey, like, initially this is going to take a little bit more work, and we're going to have to shift the cost from the team that traditionally is standing around in the field solving this problem at a layout stage or an early framing stage, and shift that cost into these other parts of the business. And so it's really trying to get ahead of those things and work with those project teams to shift and understand the implications, to the system of bringing in a new tool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's obvious that yours is the voice of experience here with all of these real world examples. So, as we wrap this up, I wonder if maybe the most appropriate question to get to a real takeaway, um, is, what's your advice for a new director of innovation? Maybe they're new to the role, like you came in to a role, but maybe it is a new role. Maybe it's something they
Yeah.
advocated for, or maybe it was something that had been created, and they were hired for that position. But what's your best advice for a new director of innovation?
Um, I think we have to lead in both directions, right? So you got to lead up and you got to lead down. Um, you, you need to develop um, that camaraderie, but also that, two-way communication with the folks that are putting the
Mm,
work into place, but also have a consistent story about the strategy behind it. Like, where are we going with this? What does it mean? Bringing in individual tools to solve for specific efficiencies in different places. That's really the work of your project teams. That's the work of the
mm,
individual people, that are doing their job, right? But how does all of that fit together? And then eventually, how does that lead us into a better business model? And that's the part of leading up, is advocating and explaining that technology is one of the last levers that we have to push efficiency in our business, right? We can't just throw more people at it. We can't just throw more cash at it. It's that multi-factor productivity that is like the one tool that we really have to push on. And what that's going to do is, shift the way that we do business. And so we need to keep that in mind at the same time. So keeping those two things in mind, keeping that high level, where is the industry going? Where does it need to go?
mm.
And then also sharing in what the implications are for folks, on the front lines.
Yeah, yeah, that's great advice, and it's one of the reasons that we have launched this mastermind for directors of innovation. People in that realm is for those of you that are out there that aren't familiar with the mastermind. I am bullish on masterminds. I have facilitated, I participate in, and just the ability to have a safe place to learn from each other and support each other and share ideas and what's working, what's not working. If that's something that you're interested in, just drop that in the comments wherever you're watching this now, and I'll get back to you about that. But advice like this and experiences like this, Aaron, are really valuable, and I appreciate you coming in and sharing these with the Shadow Partners community.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. I appreciate being able to have this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good one. This is one that could easily continue. This could be a shadow long, very, very easily. But we'll put a cap on it here, and maybe we'll bring it back at some point because there's so much to talk about in this area. So thanks again, and for all of you out there that are watching either live or in some time shifted version of this, we thank you. We'll be back again tomorrow with another Shadow Shorts. We are in a transition period right now where we're sometimes live and we're sometimes recorded. And the if you've been paying attention, you may have seen that the Shadow Partners Network, the podcast version, is sneaking out now. So a little bit of transition time right now as we go through some technological iterations here with the and format iterations with Shadow Shorts. But we'll be back tomorrow, noon Eastern, with another conversation with an expert, a thought leader, or doer in the realm of innovation for the built environment. Thanks, and we'll see you tomorrow.